I had thought attending the Scalar would finally feel like I belonged, like all the years of trying, saving, and pretending to fit into his world were paying off. But the second we stepped through those grand doors, I realized I had been nothing more than a prop in his carefully curated image. He smiled at the crowd, dazzling them with his charm and wealth. And then, as if rehearsed, he leaned in close and whispered, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Don't embarrass me tonight, remember who you are?" The sting wasn't just in his words. It was in the way everyone glanced at me, the slight tilt of their heads, the tiny smirks of amusement. My cheeks burned, my stomach churned, and a hollow panic settled in my chest. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the velvet carpet beneath my heels. I kept my smile rigid, my voice clipped when asked a question. But inside, anger began to coil. How long had I allowed this man to dictate my worth? How long had I let his obsession with money, status, and appearances silence me? That night, I realized that the humiliation wasn't just about pride, it was about being erased, dismissed, treated as though my existence was inconvenient. I felt every glance and whisper as if they were knives, carving away the confidence I thought I had. And yet, beneath the hurt, a spark ignited. I would not remain a shadow in his spotlight. If he thought he could belittle me in front of everyone, he had another thing coming. I clenched my fists beneath my designer clutch and made a silent vow. I would rise, not just to reclaim my dignity, but to show the world that underestimating me would be his gravest mistake. That night, as the orchestra swelled and champagne glasses tinkled, I let everyone see a polished, compliant version of me. But inside, a storm was gathering, a storm that would make him regret every sneer, every whispered insult, and every moment he thought he controlled me. This was not the end of my story. It was the moment I decided to rewrite it entirely. The plan had been months in the making, though no one suspected a thing. I left only a brief note on the marble countertop of our penthouse, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. "I'm gone. Don't look for me." No explanations, no farewells, just the truth in its starkest form. When they found it, chaos erupted. Calls went unanswered, friends whispered behind closed doors, and he, my so-called partner, pale and flustered, rushed from one high society contact to another, desperate to save face, desperate to appear the man who had it all under control. I watched from a distance, unseen, heart thudding not with fear but with exhilaration. For the first time in years, I felt free. Flashbacks flashed across my mind, the nights he laughed at my modest upbringing while boasting to his peers, the subtle dismissals when I suggested ideas, the way I was always too sensitive or not polished enough for his world. I remembered the holidays he spent celebrating his friends' children while ignoring mine, the public japs that left me flustered and humiliated, the casual arrogance that masked his insecurities. The hierarchy had been suffocating, an invisible cage reinforced by sparkling gowns, champagne toasts, and whispered alliances. I had tried to play by their rules, bending myself into someone I wasn't, only to realize the only way to reclaim control was to vanish entirely. The sensation was intoxicating, the thrill of freedom, the terror of the unknown, the satisfaction of finally turning the tables. Everyone thought I had been taken, lost, perhaps even dead, but in reality, I was already constructing a new version of myself, one they would never anticipate. The first step of revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was complete, calculated disappearance, the silent promise of justice that would echo louder than any confrontation. As I watched the news reports speculate, as friends and family exchanged frantic calls, I smiled quietly, savoring the shock I had orchestrated. No one had expected it, and that was exactly the point. I arrived in the new city with nothing but a suitcase, a carefully chosen alias, and a single, unwavering goal: to rebuild myself on my own terms. No one knew my name, my past, or the life I had left behind. Every morning, I walked the streets with a sense of purpose, blending in while observing, learning, and slowly mapping out opportunities. I found work that allowed me to save quietly, investments that grew steadily, and small ventures that no one could trace back to me. Each calculated decision was a statement to myself. I was no longer the girl who trembled under the weight of someone else's expectations. Nights were spent poring over finances, crafting plans, and envisioning a future where my worth was self-determined. Along the way, I discovered how resilient I truly was, how resourceful, how much I could endure without breaking. I practiced speaking aloud to myself in mirrors, rehearsing confidence, convincing my reflection that the woman staring back would never be underestimated again. Slowly, the fear and humiliation that had once dictated my life transformed into sharp clarity and determination. I began to relish my anonymity not as a hiding place, but as a laboratory for reinvention. The thrill of secrecy fueled me. Each small success, from a clever investment to a strategic relationship formed in the background, was a quiet victory against the world that had mocked me. I wasn't just surviving, I was evolving, forging a version of myself that was smarter, stronger, and more dangerous in subtle ways than anyone could imagine. By the time I allowed myself to dream of stepping back into the world I had left, I was no longer the girl he had humiliated. I was a force quietly building, biding my time, and preparing for the moment the world would finally see who I had become. It hit me like a punch to the chest when I saw it on social media. His wedding, a sprawling, opulent affair in one of the city's most exclusive venues, every detail dripping with wealth and prestige. He was smiling in every photo, standing beside a woman who clearly embodied everything he had always valued: status, beauty, pedigree. My first reaction was a storm of disbelief and fury. How dare he flaunt his life as if I had never mattered, as if the years of humiliation, of silent suffering, had been irrelevant. But beneath the anger, a flicker of something darker and more precise emerged: curiosity. I needed to know every detail: who would be there, what alliances he was flaunting, which of his so-called friends would witness my absence. My mind raced, not with jealousy, but with strategy. The very wedding meant to celebrate his triumph now became a target, a stage for a reckoning I had been planning in shadows. Every picture, every news article, every social media post fueled my resolve. I replayed the public humiliation from that gala, the whispers, the laughter, and now, with distance and time, it all sharpened into a singular, undeniable truth. The world would witness the reversal, and I would ensure that he would never underestimate me again. The blend of anger, anticipation, and carefully controlled excitement churned in my chest, and I knew that my next moves had to be perfect. This wedding wasn't just a celebration for him. It was the countdown to my reclamation. I walked into the room wearing a carefully chosen mask of confidence, my new identity flawless, my appearance elegant, but unassuming. No one recognized me. No one suspected that I was the very person they had once whispered about behind champagne flutes. I smiled, laughed politely at the right moments, and let my eyes subtly scan the room, memorizing faces, alliances, and patterns of behavior. Conversations floated past me, casual at first, but I listened for every hint of arrogance, every boast, every slip of the tongue. "I can't believe she got that promotion over me," a colleague murmured about his business associates, revealing envy I could exploit. "He's always been weak where money is concerned," someone else whispered, eyes darting nervously. Each snippet of information was fuel for the plan forming in my mind. At one point, I approached a mutual acquaintance, laughing at a shared joke, and casually asked about the bride-to-be. Their words spilled effortlessly. Insecurities, indulgences, habits that could be used to my advantage. I realized that beneath the glittering facade, my ex's world was full of cracked selfishness, greed, overconfidence. I filed away every detail, constructing mental dossiers, imagining how each piece could unravel his empire. The more I listened, the more I understood that the power he thought he wielded was fragile, easily dismantled with patience and precision. I left the evening with my heart pounding not with fear, but with exhilaration. Every secret I uncovered, every vulnerability I noted, brought me closer to the moment when the world would finally see the truth about him. Every smile I offered, every polite laugh, was a calculated step toward reclaiming what had been stolen from me. It started small, almost imperceptible, exactly the way I wanted. Power isn't taken in one dramatic strike. It's eroded, loosened, and quietly redirected until the person holding it doesn't realize it's slipping through their fingers. My ex had built his entire identity on the illusion of control, so I targeted the illusion first. The first step was a conversation, just a gentle nudge to one of his business partners at a charity brunch I happened to attend. I mentioned a rumor softly, thoughtfully, as if I were reluctant to speak. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, lowering my voice. "But I heard he's been moving funds a little aggressively for someone planning a wedding of that scale." I let my brows knit together, concerned but innocent. It didn't matter whether the rumor was true. All that mattered was that the man listening had always envied my ex's flashier lifestyle. His mind did the rest of the sabotage for me. Then came the social media leak. A harmless-looking, blurry photo my ex arguing with a supplier months earlier. His expression twisted in that particular mix of entitlement and disdain I knew far too well. The image didn't show anything incriminating, but it resurfaced memories for people who had once been on the receiving end of his arrogance. Comments spiraled, old stories resurfaced, and suddenly the polished narrative he curated began to show hairline fractures. Next, I let a whispered truth drift into their right ears, that his bride-to-be came from a family infamous for internal drama and financial instability, not a lie, simply a fact he had tried to bury. In elite circles, perception is currency, and reminding people of a stain on the family name was enough to make them question the alliance he was trying so desperately to elevate himself with. Each move was slow, subtle, deliberate. A text accidentally forwarded to someone who shouldn't have seen it. A boutique owner quietly informed that the bride-to-be was shopping with credit she didn't have. A private message to a wedding planner hinting that the groom had promised payments he wasn't prepared to make. No single action could be traced to me. No trail, no suspicion, not even a whisper of my existence. But together, they began to shift the balance. Within days, my ex's investors grew cautious. People he relied on suddenly grew distant, their tone clipped and professional instead of warm. One of his most loyal colleagues began asking questions loudly, publicly, about budget discrepancies. And the bride-to-be, her family, started demanding answers when they learned certain financial mentions had been exaggerated. The beauty was that none of them confronted him directly, at least not at first. Instead, they hesitated around him, watched him more closely, and every pause, every glance, every delay chipped away at his confidence. The first reversal of power settled over me quietly, like a cool, calming breeze. I had leverage now, real leverage, not because I had revealed myself, but precisely because I hadn't. He didn't know the walls were closing in. He didn't realize the people he trusted were now questioning him. He couldn't see the invisible thread connecting each unraveling moment back to me. That was the point. I wanted him to feel the ground shift without understanding why. I wanted him to sense a storm approaching without seeing the clouds. The same way he once made me doubt myself, doubt my value, doubt my place in the world. I wanted him to experience that creeping uncertainty, that quiet panic. And he did. I could see it on his face in every new photo posted online. His smile tightened. His eyes darted more than they used to. The woman beside him looked confused, even worried, as if she could sense something was wrong, but didn't know how to articulate it. Power had begun to tilt subtly, silently in my direction, and I wasn't even finished. I often replayed those moments in my mind, the ones that had chipped away at my confidence until I felt hollow inside. The gala where he whispered my worthlessness for all to hear. The family brunch where he loudly compared me to his friends' daughters. The countless dinners where I smiled politely while he subtly humiliated me in front of strangers. Each memory burned with the same sting. I remembered the time he mocked my modest upbringing at his parents' mansion, laughing at the clothes I could afford, the vacations I couldn't take, the life I had tried to build quietly. And there was the public embarrassment at that charity auction when he corrected me mid-sentence, making me look foolish while the elite crowd chuckled politely, pretending to be polite, but clearly entertained by my discomfort. I thought of the whispered remarks behind my back, the poor girl trying so hard murmurs that reached my ears despite the forced smiles. Each humiliation accumulated like stones in my chest, shaping the woman I was becoming. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight of invisibility. The feeling that my existence was inconsequential in a world obsessed with appearances. Those recollections weren't just memories, they were fuel. Every flashback reminded me why I had staged my disappearance, why I had abandoned the life he controlled. I had finally realized that my dignity, my sense of self, and my revenge were worth more than any facade of belonging. The pain I endured had not broken me. It had sharpened me, preparing me to return stronger, smarter, and impossible to dismiss. I arrived at the venue under a new guise, dressed elegantly yet unassuming, the perfect blend of sophistication and invisibility. No one recognized me, though I recognized them all. Every familiar face, the smug glances, the overconfident smiles served as a reminder of how far I had come. I moved through the crowd carefully, laughing politely, nodding at acquaintances, all the while taking mental notes. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel it in the subtle shifts of body language, the barely their hesitations in conversation. One of his colleagues, oblivious to my identity, made a careless remark about his lavish expenditures, and I stored it away, savoring the irony. At the bar, I overheard the bride-to-be dismissively gossip about her fiancé's past failures, her voice light but cutting. I smiled inwardly, imagining how these moments would later amplify the unraveling I had set in motion. A waiter bumped into me, apologizing profusely, and I let it happen, observing the reactions of the elite around me. Their tiny gestures, their overpolished manners, all became pieces of the puzzle I was assembling. Every laugh I shared, every polite nod, masked the storm gathering beneath the surface. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the knowledge that the climax was near, that each whispered slight and careless comment was unknowingly feeding my strategy. I had stepped back into the world that once humiliated me, but this time I was invisible and untouchable, quietly orchestrating the collapse of the empire that had once overshadowed me. The tension was electric, palpable. The audience, in a sense, could feel it too, anticipating the moment when all the threads I had woven would snap into revelation. Each passing minute drew me closer to the moment I would no longer be hidden. Yet the calm before the storm was essential, allowing every detail, every misstep of theirs to accumulate until the impact would be undeniable. I waited until the toast. The room was buzzing with laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the soft murmur of well-dressed guests congratulating the bride and groom. I stood at the edge, my heart hammering, careful to appear as a distant, curious observer. Then, when the moment felt right, I stepped forward. Silence began to ripple through the crowd as heads turned. I smiled, calm, controlled, and I let my voice carry. Everyone here thinks they know the story. I began, catching the eyes of the groom and his new bride. But the truth is far more interesting than the fairy tale you've been sold. A hush fell, murmurs dying as people leaned in. I recounted the manipulations, the lies he had told to climb social ladders, the public humiliations I endured, subtle yet piercing reminders that the man at the center of this celebration was not who he claimed to be. He pretended to love, to protect, to honor, I said, glancing directly at him, while plotting, exploiting, and dismissing the very people who trusted him most. Faces around us shifted, shock, disbelief, and fascination mingling. I revealed how he had misrepresented investments, how he had silenced those who questioned him, and how his carefully constructed image was built on betrayal. The bride-to-be's face went pale, confusion and horror washing over her features, while he stammered, eyes darting, trying to grasp what was happening. I continued, recounting anecdotes only I could know, moments of public embarrassment he thought were hidden, financial maneuvers no one expected. Guests exchanged shocked glances, whispers cascading into a chorus of doubt. The power he had wielded so easily slipped from his grasp as his empire began to crumble in front of everyone, their judgment already forming in real time. "You see," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline. "The truth always has a way of catching up." By the time I finished, he was pale, defeated, words failing him. The facade shattered. The audience, once mesmerized by his charm and wealth, now looked at him with disbelief. Disbelief mingled with silent condemnation. And me, I felt a rush of vindication. The culmination of years of planning and restraint. The sweet satisfaction of witnessing justice unfold in real time. The room had been his stage, and now it belonged to me. By the next morning, the fallout was undeniable. Social media buzzed with murmurs of the revelation. Photos of the stunned faces at the wedding circulating faster than anyone could contain them. Business associates withdrew invitations to events. High-profile partners reconsidered deals. And whispers of financial mismanagement began to circulate in boardrooms. The carefully curated image he had spent years constructing, the aura of untouchable success, disintegrated overnight. Invitations he had once relied upon were rescinded, and his so-called friends avoided eye contact, unsure whether to confront him or simply distance themselves. The bride-to-be faced her own isolation, her glamour overshadowed by association with a man exposed as a liar and manipulator. I watched from a distance, unseen, feeling a quiet, unshakable thrill. The tables had turned completely. Where once I had been invisible, dismissed, and humiliated, now I was the unseen force controlling the narrative. Every connection I had quietly nurtured, every subtle leak, every whispered hint had combined into a tidal wave that left him powerless. He tried to speak, to explain, to salvage dignity, but his words fell flat. Eyes that once looked up to him now measured his desperation. His arrogance reduced to trembling uncertainty. For the first time, I felt the full weight of control in my hands. No shouting, no public theatrics, just the steady, undeniable shift of power. I had orchestrated the collapse without revealing myself, and the satisfaction was complete. The elite circle that had once scoffed at me now witnessed him falter, and the realization that the world's gaze could shift so quickly was intoxicating. I could smile quietly, knowing that the empire he had built on lies and status was in ruins, and I was the architect of its demise. The second reversal of power was absolute. He was no longer untouchable, and I, once silenced and overlooked, had become the quiet force no one could ignore. Alone in my apartment that evening, I let the adrenaline fade and allowed myself to reflect. The storm I had orchestrated had passed, leaving silence in its wake. And in that quiet, I finally felt something I hadn't in years: relief. Not the hollow satisfaction of fleeting triumph, but a deep, bittersweet understanding of what I had endured and what I had become. I thought about the humiliation, the endless belittling, the whispers behind my back, and how each moment had shaped me. They had tried to define me, to cage me with their expectations and judgments, yet here I was, standing outside of their control, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. My revenge had been meticulous, quiet, precise, but it wasn't cruelty that sustained me. It was justice. It was clarity. It was the reclamation of a life they had tried to diminish. I felt the weight of closure settle over me, the kind that comes when a story is told fully and the wrongs are acknowledged, even if only indirectly. And with that closure came insight. I didn't need the recognition to validate my worth. I had proven it to myself. Every plan, every patient move, every quiet observation had led me to this moment, and I realized I was capable of resilience I had never imagined. The fear, the pain, the loneliness, all of it had forged a new self, someone unshakable, perceptive, and entirely my own. As I sank into my thoughts, a gentle sense of empowerment washed over me. The world had witnessed his collapse, yes, but I had witnessed my own rise, and that truth was far more satisfying than any applause or acknowledgement he could have offered. Weeks later, I walked through the city streets under my own name. Though no one recognized me, the chaos I had left behind had settled. his empire in disarray. And the people who once overlooked me now whispered in awe of my absence and subtle power. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My satisfaction wasn't in public approval, it was in knowing I had reclaimed my life without compromising who I was. Every choice, every calculated move, had been driven by clarity, intelligence, and restraint, not vengeance alone. I allowed myself small joys again. Evenings spent laughing with genuine friends, quiet mornings sipping coffee on the balcony, nights of reading without anxiety. The weight I had carried, the humiliation, the fear, the invisibility had lifted, replaced by confidence and peace. I had completed my revenge, yes, but more importantly, I had nurtured my humanity throughout, refusing to let anger dictate my actions. I had proven that strength didn't require cruelty, and justice could be served with precision and dignity. Looking back, I felt an undeniable sense of closure. The wrongs had been addressed, the lessons learned, and the path ahead bright and unshakable. For the first time in years, I was truly free, and that freedom, tempered by wisdom, was the ultimate victory. Even after the wedding chaos had settled, the consequences continued to unfold in ways no one had predicted. A few former colleagues reached out quietly, apologizing for their blind loyalty and offering support I had never imagined. Old friends I thought I had lost to his influence began reconnecting, intrigued by the subtle power I had wielded from the shadows. I discovered that secrets he had carefully hidden, financial discrepancies, personal betrayals were now surfacing through channels I had carefully nudged, and each revelation deepened his embarrassment without requiring my presence. The bride-to-be's family began questioning her choices, realizing too late the instability they had ignored. While my carefully maintained anonymity allowed me to observe from a distance, savoring each ripple of consequence, each small victory, seemingly disconnected, reinforced the totality of the reversal. His control had been shattered in layers, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. The satisfaction was sweet, quiet, and complete, yet it left a lingering curiosity. How far-reaching could the aftermath extend? I smiled, knowing that every calculated step had planted seeds that would continue to grow long after I walked away. As I watched the city lights twinkle from my apartment window, I felt the weight of everything I had endured slowly lift. The humiliation, the betrayals, the years of being dismissed, they were no longer chains, but reminders of the person I had become. I had learned that resilience is forged in quiet moments of planning and patience. That justice doesn't always arrive in grand gestures, but often in the subtle shifts no one notices until it's too late. Karma had its way, not through chaos alone, but through careful orchestration, timing, and clarity of purpose. I thought of the lives I had touched indirectly, the allies I had quietly gained, and the way my own strength had grown without compromising my humanity. A new chapter awaited me, one built on self-respect, awareness, and quiet power. And though I didn't know what challenges lay ahead, I was ready. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. The story was mine now, and while the world watched, I had the freedom to write the next act, fully in control, fully alive, and infinitely prepared for whatever came next.